What is the most effed up thing you've seen a friend do? Had a friend who had a 9mm handgun, who liked to put a replica bullet into it, and pretend he was going to shoot people at his house. He'd even go as far as squeezing the trigger to really scare the F out of people. One night he was drunk as hell, and decided to pull this trick on a friend of his roommates, who'd never been to the house before. Velp. That night the idiot accidentally put a live round into the chamber and fired. The bullet missed this girl's head by effing inches. He begged us not to call the police. We called the police. This happened in my hometown at a party. Effing around with his gun to show off. Guy blew his friend's brains out at a party with about 100 people. He's still in jail, 20 years later. Edit. Happened in Northern California for those who are wondering. Another edit. I do not know all the details, but there was more to it, that resulted in long jail time. A legally obtained gun. Drugs. Some other stuff, I believe. We were working in an old lady's attic, and he kicked the shit out of a pipe, on purpose, then went and told her it needed to be replaced. I never worked with him again, after that. Not a friend. Worked with a total piece of shit, and watched him take advantage of an old lady, eventually saying some drywall needed replaced, and just kicking it in. Edit. Guy ended up going back to prison for stealing like $40,000 from the Boy Scouts. A girl was falling down drunk, totally out of it, no drink spiked. She had been doing a crazy amount of shots, without knowing they were double shots. This one friend of mine insisted on taking her home by himself. Me and 3 of other people in the group insisted, more strongly, to come along and help her home. The whole way back, he kept trying to assure us that he had things under control, and didn't need our help, and it became clearer and clearer he was planning on raping her. We aggressively told him to knock it off, and got her home. First, he tried to insist he should stay with her too, make sure she's okay, which we vetoed. Then, we caught him trying to get her keys out of her purse, so he could come back inside. When that happened, we'd had enough, and things got rough. We didn't beat him up, but we very forcefully got him out of her student residence building. She was in bad shape, so we found a friend of hers, from down the hall, who agreed to come over and look after her. We were worried she might throw up in her sleep or something. Later on that night, he got caught pounding on her dorm room door, by the same friend, after he managed to sneak back into the building, by following someone else when they came in. The whole friend group split up over staying friends with him, but F that guy. She was literally passed out on her feet, and totally incoherent. Deliberately get knocked down by a car, in order to prove that, when drunk, and we were very drunk, his bones were flexible. Fortunately, the car had been slowing to turn. There followed a couple of minutes, trying to reassure the driver he was okay, whilst calling him an idiot. Meanwhile, he was laying flat on his back, maintaining he'd proved his point. Throw McDonald's fries and burger, as hard as he could, at a homeless lady, asking for food. I called him a piece of shit, and never spoke to him again. I think we had the same friend. A friend I don't talk to anymore, gave a homeless man $20, under the condition that he would have to stand there, getting berated, about how he effed his own life up. We dragged him away, as he was yelling at this dude, who was now bawling his eyes out. Watching him in hysterics while picking up a $20 off the ground, was one of the most heartbreaking things I've seen. If we're talking ex-friends, he beat his child for touching my guitar, the one I brought over specifically, to show the boy and let him play with. He was 3. I have a friend like this. I bought a bunch of Legos and set up a whole section in my garage, for his kid to play, while we hung out. I even built a bunch of small model things, for the intention of him disassembling them and being, a child. Dude made his child cry for taking apart one of the parts. The little dude was terrified to touch the Legos after that and wouldn't listen to me when I told him that's the point. I don't want to step in and tell someone how to raise your kids, but when I literally buy shit for him to play with and destroy, don't get mad at him for playing with them and destroying them. Destroy as in break the little models I made. Edit. Please don't read too much into this. This was one incident in an over decade-long friendship. He's a great single father who has more struggles than most people I know. For example, I have my first child coming in 4 weeks and he's been over every week helping paint and get the house fixed up. Some of you have said things that upset me, because I care about these people. Sorry, you may cut people out after one disagreement, but that's not me. People aren't perfect, people make mistakes, it's about learning from them. It was really effed up in the moment, but instead of kicking him out of my life and cutting contact, we talked about why it happened and why he felt the need, and I feel he's a better father after that discussion. We can all only improve one step at a time. I didn't step in at the moment, cause I was surprised, but we have since squashed that and moved past it. His son just always asked me to break them now, which is funny. Lesbian best friend, that got kicked out of her religious parents' house, and I let her stay with me. She effed my then girlfriend. To be fair, this isn't a great girlfriend, either. Brag about a then boyfriend not leaving her, despite constant cheating. Then cry when he left her. I don't know either. Were we friends with the same person? This girl would do the same, and then called me crying, saying someone outed her to her boyfriend, and he finally left. Props to whoever actually told the boyfriend. I feel a bit guilty for not doing it myself. Brought my friend to watch my boyfriend practice his drumming. She kept spreading her legs wide, wearing a skirt, with no underwear. She slept with him, and he left me, thinking he would be with her. Needless to say, she didn't date him, because she already had a boyfriend. Was out for the night with two of my friends, and we were all crashing at one of their parents' houses that night. Get drunk, head home, and decide to grab some snacks from the kitchen before hitting the sack. Out of nowhere, my friend gets a watermelon out of the fridge and dares my other friend to F it. We're teenage lads at this point, so we all find this hilarious, especially when my friend actually does put his D in the thing. But that's not the effed up bit. My friend, whose house it was, then takes the effed watermelon, screams, "Yeah!" and starts to eat where it had been effed. He then threw it full force into the wall, and went to bed. Needless to say, me and the watermelon effer went to bed that night, feeling a bit weird about the D-melon munching friend. Never stayed there again. You know you've taken things too far, when you make the watermelon effer uncomfortable. My best friend had just broken up with my brother, who had moved over 1,000 miles and changed jobs to be with her, citing personal differences. My brother was devastated, but I tried to respect her decision and be a source of support for both of them, especially because they truly weren't the best fit. But then she shared with me, because she knew that I loved her and would be happy for her so long as she was happy, that she'd been cheating on my brother for the past month and had found her soulmate. The depth of my brother's heartbreak, already immense, was further compounded by the infidelity. To my bewilderment, she truly couldn't understand why I was ending the friendship, seemed so distraught that I would end a years-long relationship over something so small. And I still can't comprehend why she thought telling me would result in anything other than a complete door slam. Hannah, you still suck. And I'm still angry. Edit, ETA, that I had also asked her to be the maid of honor in my upcoming wedding. Ironic. A guy I worked with was about to take his wife on a trip back to their mutual hometown, in another state. They had a pair of delightful kittens, and they asked me if I would watch them while they were gone. I had little experience with cats, but these two were just wonderfully playful. I gave him a call when he got back to arrange returning the kittens, but he said they had picked up a non-cat friendly dog on the journey and he would just drop off the kittens in the woods. Needless to say, I kept them, and they were wonderful furry friends for me and eventually to my wife and kids. I still think what would have happened to them if I had not been in the right place at the right time. My dad is a truck driver, and one day, while working, he saw someone throw something out of a car, and was suspicious. It was a bag of kittens. He managed to rescue them and we ended up taking care of them until they were old enough to adopt out. More recently, a neighbor of ours passed away and the children just let her cat out into the neighborhood, when they were emptying the house out. He was completely domesticated and had no ability to fend for himself. We ended up bringing him to the vet and taking care of him, until a friend of mine, with a small child, adopted him. They became best friends. I will never understand people who treat animals like objects. It is one of the clearest and biggest red flags someone can display. It horrifies me how many people have animal abuse stories in this post. When I was a kid, I found a baby bat that seemed injured. So, I made a home for it, in an old coffee can to get better. I went inside to eat lunch. After eating, I went to check on my new friend and it was nowhere to be found. Neither was my brother, or neighbor, best friend at the time. I eventually found them on a trail by my house laughing hysterically. They were laughing at the bat that they had just dismembered. Still think about that often and it's been 21 years or so. Edit, thanks for all the words. So, a little more backstory on them. My brother was always abusive towards animals and other kids, in the neighborhood and at school, not to mention home. He suffered a lot of mental health issues, and for some reason I try to use that to justify his actions, but truthfully I know he was just a D. It was quite difficult growing up with him. A couple years ago, he made an executive decision to leave this life. Even with all the bad shit that happened, it still messed me up a bit. I definitely do not think of him as a good person, but there was some good in there, somewhere. My neighbor was similar, but more mean towards people, and when they were together, they created a shitty duo. He also ended up taking his own life. It can't be easy holding on to so much hate. Back in high school, leaving a kegger party with a friend. There was a cat crossing the street and he sped up and ran it over. I lost it, and insisted he pull over, so I could check on the cat. It managed to get itself to side of road but died shortly thereafter. Told my friend to go on, I would walk home. That was the end of our friendship. This reminded me of the time I was on a walk in my neighborhood and came across a baby squirrel lying on the road. It didn't seem to be hurt, not sure how it ended up there. I stepped into the road and started trying to gently get the squirrel to move over to the grass. One of my neighbors pulled up in his pickup truck and stopped right in front of me. I said, there was a baby squirrel right in front of his tire and to please wait a second while I moved it. He looked at me for a second, and then said, well, that's the circle of life. Then he rolled right over the squirrel and killed it. Not quite as awful as your cat story, but years later I still think about it. A friend of a friend, and this is the reason I stopped associating with both of them. The friend of my friend had just purchased new Egyptian cotton sheets, and his wife's cat had apparently got sick and threw up and shit on them. He grabbed the cat, slammed it into the wall, grabbed a lighter, and started to burn the cat's face off. It took me a little bit to process WTF was happening, and to try and stop it, but the poor cat's had damage done. Lost an eye and whiskers on its left side. When I could get him to finally let go of the cat, I took it to the emergency vet. Told the vet the story of what happened. The cat was already on file for other incidents of injury, sadly, and they notified the wife. I don't really know what else came out of that as I left. I recommended she think about divorce, and blocked both of them on all methods of communication. It sucked, because the dude who burnt the cat was in a really good band that we would see live quite frequently, so that kind of stopped some of my social outings for a bit, but I wasn't willing to be around psychopaths like that. Best friend was excited for me to meet his new GF. The whole evening, he bragged about how she was still married, and he was going to be the reason she got divorced. Haven't spoken to him since. Did hear she broke up with him, and sorted out the issues with her husband. So, I had this roommate in college. He wasn't the most popular among my friends, but he honestly wasn't a bad guy at all. Maybe a little smug, but, honestly, that's not at all unusual for people that age. I certainly wasn't any better, and he grew out of it later. But he just kept getting pink eye. And neither he, nor I, knew why. So anyway, we were hanging out in the dorm room with two of our friends from high school, when he, my roommate, stepped out to go to class. As soon as he was out the door, friend one jumped up, dropped his pants and underwear, and effing crop dusted my roommate's pillow. Apparently, he'd been sneaking in, and doing this regularly for weeks, but, this time, decided to let me and friend two in on the secret, and, additionally, just sharted all over the pillow. Visible flecks of shit all over it and the bed. Friend two and I did not think it was nearly as entertaining as friend one did, and immediately informed my roommate. Apparently friend one had also been pissing in people's soda bottles. We dropped him from the group pretty thoroughly, after all that. Edit, I've been told that's not how pink eye works, so, maybe, that's just something me and my friends convinced ourselves happened, during subsequent retellings. I went on holiday for a week and asked my best friend to pop in and feed my cat. He lived a few doors away. When I got back, my cat was laying by the back door of my house. Went inside, and his bowl was empty. I called him and asked when the last time he fed him. He said, "Oh yeah, I forgot. My cat had been outside for a week with no food or water. I haven't spoken to him in 12 years. Cunt." Had a friend/roommate do that to my cats. I was going to see my family for a week, so I asked her to please feed my cats and scoop their litter box while I'm gone. She had 2 cats of her own, so I wasn't asking her to do anything she wasn't already doing, and I had done the same for her in the past. Came back after a week and not only were their food bowls empty, their water bowl was bone dry, and both their beds were filled with shit and piss. because she never scooped the litter and they will stop using the box if it's too dirty. I was freaking livid, but since I was living in the house she owned, and paying her rent, I didn't feel like I had any recourse, but to just keep my mouth shut, and move out as fast possible. F you, Kia. Brag about effing a mutual close friend's very recent ex, while his 8-month pregnant wife was at home, by herself. Tried to show me photos. Immediately removed from my wedding invite list. Don't respect your marriage, you won't be a part of mine. 3 years ago, I made the decision to stop drinking. After about 11 months of sobriety, my best friend shows up at my door, several bottles of vodka with her. I'm tired of you being sober, stop being a little bitch, and get drunk with me today. After a moment of shock, I uttered, no, that's not happening, and we're never speaking again. Door closes. She tried to reconnect several times, immediately following, I'm sorry, I was only kidding, and, I'll kill myself if you really don't talk to me ever again. To which I replied, I will not feel guilty for any choices you choose to make in your life. Stopped her manipulation pretty good. Eventually, a relative of hers calls me asking what happened, as the friend stated that I cut them out for no reason. As soon as I told the relative, well, I got sober and they didn't like that, and wanted me to drink with them again, the relative interjected, say no more, I respect you for what you did. She really needs to get some help, thanks for taking my call and explaining. In retrospect, I waited way too long to cut that friend out. A friend of 15 years, let him stay with me for 6 weeks, after being kicked out, agreed to bring him on my lease, since I live in a 2-bedroom alone. Asked him for rent, left to take my dog out to the park. Came back to an empty apartment, and my number blocked. Had a female friend who set me up with a friend of hers. We texted for a month or so, with said friend, only to find out it was my friend, or who I thought was my friend, catfishing me. Why she did this was beyond me. I didn't think it was funny obviously, but it effed with my head a great deal, and when me and my other friends called her out on it, with more than enough evidence to prove she did it, she still denied it. I couldn't talk, or wanted to talk to woman for about a year or so. I was so effed up from it. I once saw an ex-friend of mine kick her boyfriend so hard in his ribs that afterward he peed blood. He was lying on his back at the time. His transgression? He asked her son not to eat all the chocolate pieces out of the communal trail mix they had. He has since dumped her. Now she's homeless, addicted to drugs, in and out of jail, and even her family won't have anything to do with her. When I was in the army, we would frequent the local bars. Not surprising. However, there was a girl there, paralyzed from the waist down. I do remember she was in a wheelchair, and she legit advertised giving it up for solders, for her love of country. Wasn't my cup of tea. However, my friend really had no shame at all and took her up on her offer. Apparently she had a no anal rule, and according to PFC dipshit, he broke that rule, and she allegedly had no idea that he did. After he did this, he left her at the barracks, on the 3rd floor. 3 months later, he melted a cup, pissed hot for all kinds of drugs, and went AWOL when confronted. They eventually found him living in the woods a few miles off post. He had me help model for one of his photo shoots that was set on top of a very tall building. When he asked me to move to the edge, he kept talking about how cool it would be to capture someone's death from a building in real time. At this point, I was getting somewhat nervous. Then he gave me a little shove. I backed away and then almost slipped. His response, "See, that could have been so cool. You have mental health issues anyways, why don't you just do it, and you'll be posthumously famous, which will give your life meaning." Now keep in mind, this is paraphrased, since it's been a long time ago, but that was the gist of it. And I've never forgotten how it made me feel. After that, I started to gradually cut this person from my life, out of fear that he would try to hurt me for the sake of his art. F that guy. Trigger warnings all around for this one. Seriously, if you're sensitive to topics involving please scroll on past. My best friend and roommate killed himself in front of me 29 years ago. He used a .38 revolver that he purchased from a pawn shop, of all places. I didn't know he had it, nor did I know he was going to end his life. We were watching Star Trek TNG and drinking beers. When the episode ended, he said he wanted to listen to some music, so he put in the cassette tape. This was a while back, after all. It was the soundtrack for Man of La Mancha. It was Q2, to dream the impossible dream. Jesus. To this day, that song. I just can't. As the song played, he said something about how sorry he was that it had to end this way, us being who we are. Us being who we are. That line haunted me for decades. What did that even mean? It wasn't until I cleared out some old comic books, a few years back, that it fell into place. It was a line from an old Wolverine comic. But back to the story at hand. He'd had the gun stuffed between the couch cushions. It was like a magic trick. There was nothing, then abracadabra, there was a gun. I have replayed this a million times, and almost 30 years worth of therapy. There was no possible way for me to stop what happened next. He put the pistol against the base of his skull, and, bang. Why the base of the skull? That one's easy. If you'd had to spend all that day picking bits of bone and brain out of your hair, you'd know why. His face, from the eyes up, was gone. The one eye that remained in its socket, had rolled up, to stare at the ceiling, as his head slouched forward. That was the most effed up thing a friend ever did. It happened at 10:45 p.m. July 3, 1994. Many years ago, my friend was telling a mutual friend of ours, his girlfriend was no good, and cheating on him. He proceeds to have sex with her, on videotape, and invites him over his house to chill, and ambushes him with said tape. They were supposed to be pals. One of my classmates in high school slept with her tutor, and we later found out her mom also slept with him. She also became pregnant, got kicked out by her parents, and had to move in with her uncle and grandparents. I recently found out that she is a general surgeon now. She effed up, but she turned her life around. Years ago, I watched a friend sell some kid crushed up sleeping pills in place for cocaine. He had me drive him to town to meet this kid and sell him the stuff. Needless to say, this kid's sister called screaming and crying. She was begging my friend to tell her what he gave her little brother. My friend laughed about it and was completely cold and showed zero empathy through the whole situation. Later found out the kid was perfectly fine. The sister was upset because he did a line in front of her and almost immediately passed out at the table. She said he was asleep for a good 12 hours after one line. That one line was probably equivalent to 3 to 4 sleeping pills straight to the head. My friend did this to buy heroin, which I had no idea he was doing. I lost a friend that night. I was better off for it with that, and what I later learned about him was a total accident, but it was crazy. Was working at a log home company with a friend. He was on a tall stepladder, guiding a log, being held by the crane, to be placed on top of the house. The log was set down and he took the tongs off and tossed them over the side like usual, and the crane operator started to lift them. One of the tongs caught the bottom of the log, and made it start rolling right towards my friend. I looked up, just in time, to see him jumping off the stepladder, and the log rolling off the top and crushing the stepladder, while he was still in the air. It was like a movie scene. The log hit the ground on one end, and a wave went through it and split it in half down the length, like a toothpick. My friend was okay, but shaken up for sure. He nearly had 4,000-pound log fall on him. He escaped by inches. I had no idea a piece of wood could flex and break like that. Before that day was probably the craziest display of physics I've ever seen.